Tech Yeah Podcast.
That's pretty good.
I think we're
So good enough.
I think we're good.
I think we're good too.
Are you good though, Tony?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing, William?
I'm doing fine. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, I'm feeling better. I was okay. I just
Did you suffer from the Game of Thrones sickness?
No, everyone on my team though is sick right now. It's very scary. It's super scary. But no, I kind of feel like I had a fever over the weekend. I was just really hot, and wasn't feeling up to snuff. But on Sunday, I went to my friend's house to watch Game of Thrones. Actually, we sat in the jacuzzi for a long time, and it started raining. It was really cold.
Nice.
And I think the temperature change kind of messed me up or something.
Yeah.
It just burnt me out. But how are you? How was your weekend, Bill?
The weekend was good. I too watched the Game of Thrones.
Did you love it like the rest of the world loves it?
I thought the last episode was very good. I thought the previous two were kind of a little forced, but I thought that was a perfectly fine way to wrap up a show about dragons and witches and sorcerers and stuff.
I will say I thought it was the best episode of the season, and that is not high praise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought the season was rather bad, and I thought this was it kind of was along the same threads. I thought it was cheap and kind of undeserved, but at least it kind of resolved things. I thought the Starks ending was really rough, though.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was fine. They were fighting an uphill battle against themselves, and the bar was set so high. I think they did as good a job as anyone could have done under the circumstances.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too much into Game of Thrones, but
neither do I.
But yeah, I just think it's clear that they didn't want to do a full season, and they wanted to just get this thing over with, and I just feel like that showed in it. But
yeah, for sure.
But I think the world knows that, so I don't think we need to tell them.
No.
What else? I needed to describe anime to you from our earlier conversation, but I don't think we'll do that here. We'll do that somewhere else.
Okay. Yes, I need to be brought up to speed on anime memes, I guess. But
yeah. I got that for you. Don't worry.
All right.
I looked up some reference material.
Love it.
But yeah, so this is I don't even know what episode we're on, Bill. What episode are we on?
I don't know, 32, 33,
I think
32?
it's 32, but let me here. I'll go to the techyeahpodcast.com right now.
That's a perfect spot to go for all of your Tech Yeah podcast news and information.
Actually, I just did. I just went to techyeahpodcast.com, and I can clearly see we're on episode 33.
33,
this
okay.
Is episode
cool.
33, the big time trip, 6 the hard way. Here we go.
Well, there was a sad occurrence that happened yesterday. This isn't very tech related, but it made me think of technology a little bit because of the sport that this is involved in. And Formula One legend Niki Lauda died. He was 70 years old. Incredible guy. Super interesting guy. He was one of the two characters in the Ron Howard movie Rush. I don't remember what year that came out. It wasn't super long ago. But
I want to say it was 5 years ago.
5 years ago sounds about right. Yeah, it was something like that. So if you haven't seen the movie Rush, highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of... Well, if you're a fan of Formula One, you've probably already seen it. If you just enjoy good sports movies, definitely give it a watch because it's very, very good.
I gotta be honest, I'm completely ignorant on Formula One, so I don't know who this guy is. I know who Michael Schumacher is, and I think Danica Patrick raced open wheel for a while, but that would be the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, so Danica Patrick has nothing to do with Formula One.
Didn't she race open wheel though? I thought
she was in the Indy. Yeah, she was in IndyCar.
Oh, IndyCar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's IndyCar is as similar to Formula One as our football is with European football. Not really,
very
though.
similar.
No,
they're very similar.
So Niki Lauda came from an era in the 70s where Formula One was really dangerous. I mean, like multiple drivers dying every year, which is unbelievable to think about now. A sport that was
crazy.
Able to continue with multiple. If anybody died in any sport right now, I'm pretty sure as a result of the sport that the season would end. Regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
Football, baseball.
Like even Dale Earnhardt dying, they had like changed all the rules in NASCAR.
Yeah, it's completely different. And he was kind of the catalyst for a lot of safety regulations in all of motorsport, not just NASCAR. But it was his crash as well as another famous driver, Ayrton Senna, who was a Brazilian Formula One driver and arguably the greatest driver of all time. But Niki Lauda was really, really up there, and he started in the early 70s. Cool backstory. I don't want to get too much into his history, but what made me think of technology relating to the Niki Lauda story and having him just have passed away.
Well, race cars are very technological.
Very tech oriented, and especially Formula One. Formula One is, for better or worse, one of the most technologically advanced sports and industries, let alone sport.
Well, don't they have that social media race Formula One thing? You know what I'm talking about? The electric cars where you can like vote on them.
Formula E, yeah, Formula E.
Yeah,
and those are
silly.
those are electric powered open wheel cars, still run by the same governing body, the FIA. That governs Formula One. So it's similar. It's in the same kind of universe as F1, but Formula One has always been the pinnacle of automotive technology. And in the early years, it was bigger concepts like aerodynamics or suspension geometry, and later got more into materials. So they used aluminum, and then they went to magnesium, and then they went to titanium and carbon fiber, and they really pushed the envelope on a lot of automotive technologies that are now commonplace in road cars. And not just Formula One, but racing in general has done that. I mean, most things that you find on your car was developed on a racetrack, but Formula One is the pinnacle. So when Niki Lauda,
especially my car, I have a Honda Fit. That's all racetrack.
It's all racetrack developed, yeah. So when Niki Lauda came up, it was the early 70s, and his nickname was actually the computer, because he took such an analytical approach to racing and to the car development, and he was one of the best drivers, especially in his era, with giving feedback to the team on how to set the car up. And his cars, even in another driver's hands, were consistently faster because he took just a more professional approach to racing. Coming off an era where race car drivers were a lot like, fighter pilots were back in the day, where they're just like billionaire playboy, like kind of like a Tony Stark kind of guy. And he, in fact, even in, what was it, Iron Man 2 was racing in, some like made up open wheel race in fake Monaco.
Yeah.
So it was
fake Monaco.
Yeah. So it was a lot of guys like that, and there was this huge aspect of danger in it, and safety was not a concern. And these guys are, driving around with, leather helmets and just like polo shirts on.
It's like Death Wish people.
For sure. Yeah. They're just, guys with more money than sense that could pay to do this sport. So Lauda comes in and takes this really scientific approach to everything. He took care of his body. He wasn't a partier. He wasn't a big drinker. And was really analytical. He was also very mindful of safety, and he was very cautious. He was very focused on risk assessment, and which is depicted in the movie, famously tried to get this Nürburgring race in 1976 canceled because it was rainy, and the Nürburgring is notorious for being dangerous even in the dry.
Because they go so fast, right? It's like high top speed or something.
Well, it's just there's the barriers are really close. There's jumps. I mean, the cars were literally airborne at the Nürburgring, like Formula One cars airborne, and it's still largely the same track today, and I want to say it's like 68 turns on the Nordschleife, which is like the kind of the main Alpine circuit, and then there's the behemoth version of that, which includes the newer Grand Prix portion of the track. So I don't know what the actual total turn count is, but it's just 14-mile long race or track, and barriers are close, difficult turns, off camber, jumps, just like a total. It's unbelievable track. So
I know I've seen it in Gran Turismo, but that's the extent of my knowledge of Nuremberg.
Yeah, well, if you've seen it in the Gran Turismo or Forza, those are very good representations of the track. It's very difficult. I mean, if any of you have access to that track in any of those racing games, go take a lap in the highest power car that you can find, and you can appreciate how difficult it is to drive. So he tried to get this race from being run, and everyone, they kind of had a driver's meeting, voted on it, and ended up having the race anyway. And it was, there was some tire strategy at the beginning because it was wet, and then it started to dry out, so they came in for tires, blah, blah, blah. He ends up crashing, and it was kind of the career-defining moment for him because it left him very badly burned and disfigured after it. So Niki Lauda, from that point on, was extremely recognizable as the guy with the burnt face, basically. You couldn't miss him. So the movie was centered around that 1976 race, but it got me thinking because a lot of the focus of the movie and of his career was on the danger, was on the personality, was on the rawness of that sport and that spectacle, contrasting to what it's like now, where it has a very sterile feel. It's very corporate. There's a lot of sponsors. There's a lot of, everyone gives the kind of by the book answer in the press conferences. They've got like millisecond specific data on every single part on the car. They've got, track data. They've got, different wind directions from different corners. And it's just, it's mind-blowingly interesting to me as a car guy and a racing fan. So it's still satisfying in a way to watch, but in a completely different way than it was back in the 70s. And
it's very consistent now. You've got a pretty good idea of how fast the number one car is going to do in any given race.
Absolutely, absolutely. And NASCAR, a lot of NASCAR fans will say that NASCAR has kind of retained a lot of that like raw driver car connection, where Formula One and some other series, like the World GT Championship, Le Mans, some of the bigger race series has become more technologically advanced and taken, they're like computer scientists almost that are the stars of the show. It's the designers and the team principals that are very technical backgrounds. They've got PhDs in aerodynamics, high level stuff. And I don't know, it was so exciting to watch, even just, Ron Howard's representation of it. And, if you go back and watch some of the old footage of these old races, the danger is insane. And I don't know, I feel like it's lost a lot of the excitement that came with something that was one kind of new frontier stuff in terms of materials and technology at the time, but still didn't have that computer, that silicone aspect to it that is infiltrating everything. and we're seeing it creep into football and baseball. Electronic strike zones are coming. And I wanted to get your opinion, Tony. This was kind of like a long-winded lead up to this, but where is the line for you with technology helping these sports and at some point hindering it, where it's just not as fun as it used to be?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and a long-winded run-up is fun as long as it's about race cars. But. No, I agree, because I do feel like a lot of things, and sports in particular, but I didn't really have a lot of time to think about this, but really technology's infiltrating so much of what we do. Like, even this is so like different, but like if you watch the Olympics, right? Like, so many of the Olympic events, because there's a lot more like technical, are so technology heavy. Like I've done a couple archery classes, and I always think about shooting archery afterwards, and I like go on a YouTube search of it, and like the amount of technology involved in actually shooting target archery is insane. Like you see the bows they use, and they do the little flippy down thing, and it's like, yeah, there's skill there, right? But everyone's shooting bullseyes. You know what I mean? Like it's not this kind of raw like who is exceptional. It's like who is the best amongst all these kind of people that are elevated so far, right? And you see it a lot in cars too. It's funny, as someone who kind of grew up, or at least as a young adult, was very involved in motorsports and worked at car shops and went to a lot of race car events. A lot of kind of what you participate at a grassroots level is very analog, or at least it was when I did it. Now I think even that's more technological, right? Like we were just starting to get like onboard computers were kind of a big thing on race cars at the time. Like if you had an interface to go from like your computer CPU to like an on the fly programming setup was pretty intense. That was kind of like the new cutting edge, right? Like you could adjust your boost levels or adjust your fuel ratio like on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, most of what people are doing is very analog.
Yeah, wrenching on the cars.
A lot of wrenching, a lot of like non-EFI cars, like carbureted cars, and I just think it's so different now. Like even when you watch these, like I watch a lot of car YouTubes, I get sucked into those holes all the time, and
there's so many good
even
ones.
like and even like the budget build guys are like have a CPU in their car, and they're tweaking their ratios for like their turbo setups like on every car. Like it's not even like a rare thing anymore. Like everyone has some kind of interface, and all that's just like at the home level. It just scales all the way up, and even NASCAR itself, right? It's so tuned to like the highest level that it's not super exciting for me, I think, to watch that. You know what I mean? Like I think that there's a joy in the kind of the analog, like succeed and fail nature of like, trial and error and not knowing what the results are going to be, right? Like I think that the thing that's so exciting, the thing that makes you want to do experiments when you're a kid is the unknown that you're kind of reaching out into. And I think these things really spoil that. People are so afraid to venture into the unknown now.
Yeah, you're taking that really primal will out of the equation. And that is something that, and again, this is from a movie, but they did a good job of playing that up where, it really was about just personal will that gets these guys through a championship or through a race. And now it really is more like who has the most technology, who has the most budget, and all the the facilities and the analytical teams to outthink the next guy, which is interesting in its own way. But it takes away the human element that, and that's something like the baseball purists keep touting is, the human balls and strikes calls. As soon as you make those computerized, you're taking out the human element, and that's not the core of the game. And the flip side of it is, well, we have the technology to make it right. Let's make it right. And both have valid points. I think everyone, any level-headed person would agree that both have valid points. But what is ultimately more entertaining? And I think if there's going to be a divergence of people that that would rather go back and watch a 1992, Senna versus Prost, video of a race they already know the results to, versus watching Lewis Hamilton just endlessly win because they just have a car that's dialed in because they have the biggest budget or whatever.
And they have the most data and the best analysis of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny though, when you think about it, I feel like the things that have always been the most engaging in sports is failures, right? And especially failures as far as officiating, right? Like I can remember, even I'm not as into football now as I was when I was younger, but the games you remember watching, the times when you get the most engaged are the bad calls. You know what I mean? Boxing is boring. I like watching boxing actually, but the things that get you so fired up for the rematch and the things that make you think it's all rigged, which because it is the bad decisions. You know what I mean? You got to have good decisions to make the bad decisions have impact. But when you see that bad decision, you're just like, I can't believe it. I'm so mad. I'm definitely going to watch the next one. You know what I mean? And because there's something I think so compelling to people to see failures, or see the system kind of break down, or see the best guesses, to see people take a chance, and I think it reflects in business too. I mean, working for a large corporation, it's so hard for a dreamer to get their idea realized because there's so much fear of doing anything that isn't data proven. You know what I mean? If there's not a justification through data for an idea, it doesn't matter how good the idea is, no one's going to do it. And I think that's really the same concept.
It's 100% the same concept. You're totally right. I mean, it's that I don't want to say fear, but it's that mentality of...
Oh, it's fear.
I mean, it is... Maybe you're right, yeah. But it's the mentality of, we have the ability to vet this problem or this question to get it right. Because there's so much at stake now, because so many people's jobs are on the line, money, there's, corporate interests, there's investors, there's all these other entities that have to be fulfilled by any of these answers, that, well, we have the technology to at least get closer to what we believe is the right answer, and we have to pursue that. And whether that the question is, did that guy land the punch? Did that guy throw a strike? Is this new product worth taking a risk on? What degree of camber should we put in the left front tire? Or whatever. We have the ability to start to answer those questions, and it's really, really tempting to find out what those answers are because there is so much at stake.
Yeah, it's paralyzing, and I think that's what's so unexciting about it, right? Is every decision has been kind of forced, right? That's the problem of good analysis, right? Is it will lead the way, so there's no leading anymore, right? It's really who can make the most compelling story out of the data that you have available. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's the leader.
Who can spin the data the best.
Yeah, and so it's not exciting to be a participant in. You know what I mean? Maybe it's safe and maybe it's it very well is better for the people involved, right? But
It's smarter. I mean,
it's definitely not. It's definitely not sexy.
No. And that's what I worry about sports, and which makes a lot of these sport retrospective kind of movies so powerful right now, is it takes us back to times where, it was simpler. It was, man versus man, and, not gender man, but just, human versus human, and not, human backed up by computer analytics versus other human backed up by different computer analytics.
Yeah.
And I hope that, fast forwarding 20 years from now, we don't lose the exhilaration of some of these sports and the competition and stuff, because it is an important outlet. But it's starting to feel like, 40 years is really not a long time, and to see the changes that have happened from the 70s until now, it's insane across the board. Football, baseball, basketball, racing, all of your Olympic sports. It's just the drive, the competitive advantage, and the drive to find what the competitive advantage is has led everybody to go towards technology because it's so good, and it's diluting it a little bit. So,
well, it's a dark future, right? Where, because like you said, these race cars make it into our personal cars, and I think these data-driven decisions make their ways into our personal lives, right? Like, you don't decide what emails you see at the top of your inbox or what's on your Facebook feed anymore, right? Like someone kind of tells you, right? They have logarithms running, being like, this is what you want to see, and this is what you want to eat, right?
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
at what point do we just surrender and be like, I guess you're right?
Yeah. This is what the algorithm said I need to have for dinner tonight.
Yeah. At some point, it's just
it's gonna
that
happen.
food's just gonna be delivered, right?
Yeah.
Like you're never gonna make that active choice. It's gonna be like, this is what it said. And this is what I should have.
Exactly.
I guess that's what I'm eating, right?
And you know what? You'd be like, oh wow, this, I never would have thought of Thai food. This is really hitting the spot. This is great. Thank you, algorithm. I would have, never come to this decision on my own. But that also takes out a lot of what it means to be human, right? It's to make decisions, make mistakes. If you never had a bad meal, how, what does that do to the good meals? Like, what is a good meal?
Some of the best experiences in the world are like bad things with good company. You know what I mean? Like watching a bad movie with fun friends can be a lot better than watching a good movie alone. You know what I mean? Or like a bad meal with people that you want to be around.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, yeah, you remove that kind of human element, right? Because it defies analysis. Then it's like, what are you really left with? But
so the moral of the story is rest in peace, Niki Lauda. You're a legend. Very interesting life. If you guys are interested in sports figures and want to read up on a new one, Niki Lauda, unbelievable story. And also Formula One, unplug all of your race cars, please.
That's the moral? So unplug the race cars?
Unplug them. Yeah, I don't want any live data. All driver.
You heard it here first. Unplug these race cars.
Unplug them.
All right. Speaking of our dark dystopian future. So my future is the darkest because I actually use a Huawei phone every day. And I don't know how much longer that's going to last. So this story, I'm gonna read this whole story. It's kind of long, but
it's worth getting into the details because there's a few layers to this that are very interesting.
And I'm dumb, and I don't want to describe it wrong. You know what I mean? So this is from Fortune magazine. It's written by like 7 people: Jenny Leonard, Nick Wadhams, Margaret Telov, and Bloomberg. That's not even a person. So. The title of the story is Trump blacklisted Huawei after China trade wars negotiations stalled. And this was from today, and I think it's a few hours old. The Trump administration held off on blacklisting Huawei technologies Out of concern, the move could disrupt trade negotiations with China and only took action after the last rounds of talks hit an impasse, according to people familiar with the matter. Plans to target the Chinese telecommunications equipment maker over security concerns had been on the table for months and included possibly subjecting Huawei to economic sanctions, according to the people who asked not to be identified discussing internal deliberations. But the decision to curtail the Shenzhen-based company's access to American suppliers unfolded quickly once trade talks broke down, setting off a scramble to implement the measures, the people said. The Commerce Department action last week requires American suppliers of Huawei, a crown jewel of Chinese manufacturing, to seek U.S. government permission to do business within the company. The decision touched off a massive disruption in technology supply chains, hitting some of the biggest component makers as Intel Corp, Qualcomm, and Broadcom Inc. told their employees they won't provide products to Huawei until further notice. Timing of the U.S. action raised questions about whether President Donald Trump is punishing the company in part to gain a negotiating edge with Beijing in a deeper clash over trade. Talks between Beijing and Washington deadlocked this month as Trump accused China of backing out of a deal that was taking shape with U.S. officials, saying China reneged on an agreement to enshrine a wide range of reforms in law. Trump increased levies on $200 billion in Chinese imports to 25% from 10%, prompting retaliation from Beijing. The U.S. has said it's prepared to hit China with new tariffs, even as Trump said he'll meet his Chinese counterparts Xi Jinping at next month's G20 summit, an encounter that could provide pivotal. China's also threatening additional retaliation against the U.S. over blacklisting Huawei. All right, this is all about the levies. So this, what I really want to get into, this actually happened with ZTE. And I'll read this part real quick. Before trade negotiations hit a wall, some Trump administration officials were reluctant to act against Huawei because Trump had reversed similar measures imposed last year against ZTE Corp, another Chinese telecoms equipment maker that has been scrutinized over security. The concern was that Trump might reverse a Huawei order as a favor to Xi or trade away for soybean purchases by China. ZTE almost collapsed after the U.S. Commerce Department banned it for 3 months in 2018 from buying American technology. Trump undid the sanctions at Xi's request and directed his Commerce Secretary to negotiate a settlement with the company. Okay, there's one more paragraph, but Huawei's basically saw it coming. But so this is pretty crazy. As a Huawei user, I mean, these phones are currently they're not sold by any like American telecom first parties, like AT&T doesn't sell them or anything like that, but they're widely available unlocked. Like I said, I have a Huawei phone, and so initially yesterday, I was on Twitter and I actually saw a post from Android, which I've never seen post on Twitter before, basically saying that their hands were tied and they were gonna update people what they could do on their Huawei phones if they had them, as far as getting updates and Google Play access. So today they announced that they're gonna give them a 3-month reprieve from the sanction, or from being able to participate.
Yeah, 90-day exemption from it.
90 days, because realistically, the Commerce Department said they had to request to do business in the United States, but the story I said saw all the plan to be rejected. Any request made by Huawei is going to be rejected until this clears up. And it's just pretty crazy, especially like seeing like Google buy in. I was so mad, right? Because, Google, I looked it up. Google spends $21 million a year lobbying in Washington, right? So they can keep spying on your secrets and reading your emails.
Yeah, are they the
right?
number 1 or the number 2 lobbyist in Washington?
I think they were number 1 when I read it last night.
I think it's number 1.
I could be wrong, but it's like they're people are like, oh, this is gonna hurt Google, but it's not. I mean, there's still people aren't planning to switch to iPhones because they can't get a Huawei phone, right?
No.
It just improves market shares for the companies that still exist.
Yeah, Samsung is just licking their chops right now.
Dude, Samsung is so pumped right now.
Yeah.
But I think this is just a couple things. I mean, I don't want to get. I mean, of course, this is all
Get into it.
political,
Dive in. Dive in.
Normally, I have been pretty openly kind of passive about what's going on with the government, right? Like I'm not kind of one of these crazy like Trump haters. I'm definitely not a Trump lover. I think he's a moron, but I'm just like, oh, the damage is what it is. Like it's, but I think we should be kind of dealing with China as far as trade and trying to make things happen. But I think these singled out target, like the sanctions, I kind of were like fine with, but these singled out anti-competitive targeting specific companies. And I understand that the Chinese government has these companies tied to the government, right? But
big key to this, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like these are done to make an impact with China or to like fix any problem. It honestly feels like these are done to target specific competitive technologies in the United States, right? And allow other companies and even American companies that hide all their monies overseas to get a competitive edge in the market, right? And I think that's fucking shitty, right? Because that's not what like capitalism is and free trade. Like, you know what I mean? That's not what we're doing here. And this is totally unrelated, but this bullshit in Alabama, right? Like, it's like you got to step up and be like, this is not gonna stand. You know what I mean? Like that's really shitty, and it's very negative, and it's a very negative thing to do to a people. And I feel like the federal government needs to step in immediately and protect people from stuff like that happening. You know what I mean? And I don't like it. I don't like it one bit, and I'm gonna say it, right?
Well, first of all, very, very quickly, the Alabama thing, the lawmakers of that had no intention of that ever becoming a law. They made that I agree. Law, and they took out the exceptions in order to get it pushed into the courts to have it re-looked at. They had which is so funny that everyone's like freaking out about it, because it's just, like the virus of social media. Like they see one person saying, men telling women what to do with their bodies. Like, dude, the person that signed that into law, and even though it's not going into law, but signed that bill, was a woman. I mean, the governor of Alabama is a woman. Just
I agree. I agree there. I think there's a lot, and like the Alyssa Milano sex strike on this thing,
yeah,
so dumb,
so stupid.
But like, I'll be honest, Donald Trump's a scumbag. He needs to be the first person stepping up saying like, women are allowed to have abortions in this country. You guys all need to shut the fuck. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he does. He's like, he has said he's like, yeah, I'm a little softer.
I mean, like right now. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not trying to be like he's got to be Mr. like both sides, right? But Republican or Democrat, I bet Donald Trump's paid for a couple abortions in his day. Okay, like,
hot
like
take.
Just be the person.
That is a hot take.
Be the person you are, Donald Trump, right? And be like, women can have fucking abortions, right? Like, like you're willing to say all this other crazy bullshit and do all these crazy things. Well, I know he's not anti-abortion.
Yes.
Right? I know he's pro-choice.
He's commented on much, much stupider topics that in probably way less informed. But I think the abortion thing was so overblown because that was not the point of that law. They purposely, they purposely said it. So like anyone that knows what they're trying to do doesn't say anything because it's like it doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to get to the Supreme Court, hopefully, and reopen that discussion. No one is like really arguing that knows what the bill is arguing that that's ever going to happen. This is completely ridiculous because it wasn't the point of it.
In a sense, but like honestly, I don't think the Supreme Court would ever overturn Roe versus Wade, right? Like, I just don't think that's in their. I don't think that's in their interest, nor is it like. and I just don't even think it's like possible in the way that they work, right?
Which could be the case, but that wasn't the point. Like they just wanted they wanted a reason to have them relook at it without a bill to be.
Yes, but
like,
I understand the reason they want them to look at it is because they're hopeful that a court's in a place where they could overturn Roe versus Wade, right?
Of course, or modify especially Section 9 or Article 9. That's what they're really going for, is the declaration of personhood for the unborn baby. That's what they're targeting. That's what they're going after. They're trying to identify personhood and then therefore rights of the fetus at whatever point. And it's just so ridiculous because 80% of people are against late-term abortions, and it's a hot topic for a reason, because one side thinks that you're killing babies and the other side thinks I can do whatever I want. So like, of course there's going to be like disagreements there. But it's another example to kind of go back to the China tariff thing, where people just like blindly take a side without really understanding what is trying to be accomplished. And especially because of who's kind of the figurehead of some of these decisions. I mean, there are high-level...
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, there are high-level, very liberal left people that agree with everything Trump's doing with the China tariffs. And it's because it needs to happen. And he's the only one that really doesn't give a crap what the fallout is of it. I'm definitely glad that Trump is taking China to task. Like that is not my beef with the situation. It's more that this is my handset that's not going to work anymore. Like, get it together. Yeah, exactly.
But no, and I definitely agree. I think that the biggest part of all of these discussions, including this abortion thing ever even coming up, is who's in power at the time and the kind of statements you can make around who's in power, right? But man, I just want to get into a world where we can just be honest with, like you said, like 80% of the country have pretty similar feelings about abortion and how it should work, right? And what the reality of abortion is.
And that's a routers poll too. That 80% is routers.
Yeah, I mean, because I think, but we need to be able to be reasonable. Like, I don't know why we're so far away from being able to just have reasonable conversations, right? Like, I'm 100% pro-choice, right? But I will say, in being that, if you have an abortion, you're killing a baby. You know what I mean? Like both of those things can be true. Like, those aren't, like, we need to be intellectually honest when we...
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
When we make decisions, and we need to weigh our decisions and say, like, this is a point in this baby's life where we can terminate it with with no physical pain, and this baby doesn't think and remember. You know what I mean? Like we're at an impasse right now, and we can make a decision that would be low impact and low whatever you want to call it, right? And it might be morally reprehensible, but we're at a point right now where we can do it, right? And sometimes that's a right choice. You need to, you know what I mean? Like, it's not my decision to make, is what I'm saying. Yeah. So I don't know why all I'm talking about is abortion.
Yeah, you're really hung up on that.
I know, I really am. It just makes me so mad. But it goes back to this, and it goes to what we're talking about with China too. Like, we all know that China has been stealing intellectual property, does not take care of its citizens, and is unethical in the way that things are produced. Literally sends people away to fucking work camps. Like there's a lot of really shitty stuff that goes on that makes them like non-competitive with us as far as manufacturing, and someone needs to be willing to take them to task before they take over the fucking world, right? Like, because that's the course we're headed on right now, is that they're going to own all the material and all of the workforce, and everyone's going to have to buy everything from China. And And so that part I'm into. I think this Huawei thing though is, I mean, I act like I'm super mad. I just think it's so interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting. And to me, there's three key points that make this really interesting. One is the trade deficit versus trade surplus between the two countries. And from that aspect, we will crush China.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's going to be, and that's what makes this kind of like a fun chess match, because like it's so out of whack. We import $540 billion of goods from China. The China imports $120 billion worth of goods from the U.S. So the tariffs, like it can't work. Like if this trade war is going to be very short lived, and it's whoever blinks first, and it's going to be China, I believe. And it's
they have to, right?
They have. I think
their only strength is their willingness to starve its citizens, right? Like
yes, yeah. The other interesting part,
they're willing. Go ahead.
No, yeah, 100%. I mean, they already are in a lot of cases. But the other aspect of it is, to a lesser degree, the intellectual property theft. It's been a long-running joke with Chinese knockoffs of different U.S. brands, or I mean, really world brands. China is not shy about stealing intellectual property, whether it's designs, whether it's technology, whether it's ideas, and repackaging it and selling it for cheaper to their people.
Yeah, it's not even like a knockoff sometimes. Sometimes you can buy like stuff direct from the manufacturer that's just got a different brand name on it or brand name on it.
Yeah.
Because they make all the molds, make the batch that the company orders, and then they just keep making them.
Yep.
Without
license.
them.
Yeah, without license.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that. I've dealt a lot with Chinese manufacturing, and I mean they have in some contracts will even have them destroy the molds. And, short of being there and watching them destroy all of the molds that you paid for, you may never know if they really did destroy any of the molds. And I've
start seeing that shit show up on AliExpress the day after your
dude. I have been in situations where that has happened, where
I believe it.
Company spent a lot of time and money doing R&D, developing a product, and we saw it on a different company's website with slightly different little pattern, and we're just completely flipped our shit. It's horrible. So that is a really important aspect to this, and Huawei has been guilty of doing that with a number of companies, and their hardware and software too, but their phones are really good. Your phone is a really good phone, and
they're great phones.
You can make the argument that they're great because the technology was stolen by from U.S. companies, or Korean companies or Japanese companies.
I would be far more interested in defending these U.S. companies if they paid taxes.
Fair enough, but it still doesn't change the competitive advantage from a foreign company with ties to foreign communist governments. That's a tricky one to defend.
Yeah, what was the story you read before? Like the kind of the linchpin for this thing was Huawei was trying to steal like a an R&D robot, right? Remember it was
from Sprint.
Like it was a testing software or a testing robot that they had made and planted people within the company to try and get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I mean
I'm sure they've.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean it's common knowledge that I gotta kind of be careful, but it's just that the Chinese government has plants all over the world, and they're bringing information back to the government, and that's why a lot of these partially government held companies get preferential treatment and do so well because they're being fed information stolen from informants around the world. It sounds like a spy novel, but it's what is actually happening. The third aspect to this that I find that is kind of the number one aspect to this is it's capitalism versus communism. And China isn't really full communism. I mean, it's like a hybrid, capitalistic communism. I don't know, I'm sure there is some fancy term for that.
I mean, they've moved further from it as they've kind of gained wealth in that country. Like they've had so much success having a more Western kind of capitalistic business sector. You know what I mean? That they're slowly shifting away. But I mean, there definitely still is. I mean, they're turning capitalism the way we're turning kind of
socialist
as corporations. Yeah. as corporations and governments become more and more intertwined without having to be explicitly tied.
Right. Yeah, and they're very much tied pretty extensively at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we just talked about how Google's the biggest lobbyist in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
That is definitely China stuff right there when you think about a company just infusing $21 million into their government and being like, let's make sure we're both profitable. Like that.
Oh, lobbying is lobbyists are. It's terrible. It's no surprise that what is it? The top 5 zip codes in wealth are around Washington D.C. It's disgusting. And whenever you see a politician make a decision on either side, look at their campaign contributors, and
it's always going to match up.
It's very, very interesting. Yeah, it always matches up. Now that's like a little bit more out in the open because that information is public knowledge, even though we choose to ignore it. Whereas the Chinese government basically just has government officials within companies. I mean, it's like that's how closely tied they are. It's not necessarily like legal bribery, which lobbying is. It's like actual government employees making decisions within companies, which is
you see
a little different.
Yeah, it's funny how we have like an abstract layer to it, right? Like a lot of government officials end up working in the companies that were lobbying them, when they retire, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's all these like sweetheart deals, but at least we have a layer of abstraction between our government and our corporations, right?
I know.
Someone's got to hand the money that's not just directly wired.
God, so ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this story, the Huawei story, to me is like the figurehead of this bigger trade war, if you want to call it, which is a little bit dramatic of a description, because it's going to be very one-sided in the end. It has to be. I mean, there's the numbers. We would crush them.
It kind of reminds me of like a more one-sided version of like the Boeing Airbus stuff that's been going on for so long, right? Where it's these kind of figurehead companies for the country, and kind of this kind of back and forth, shots fired, like what are you gonna do? It's almost like a corporate version of a proxy war. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Like the U.S. government wants to protect its own companies versus foreign companies. Like I totally get that. And we know, through our work how like global commerce is now, where those lines are really being blurred. But ultimately, Apple, Microsoft, Qualcomm, a lot of these companies are really, U.S. rooted companies. They have manufacturing and they've got headquarters all around the world, but it's still, it's a capitalist versus quasi-communist fight. And unfortunately, these companies, which are filled with, on both sides, very smart, very hardworking people, and they're kind of pawns in this like big war for like economic types that are. I mean, this has just been going on for so long, and it's just coming to a head here because it can happen so quickly, and the technologies at play here are so lucrative that, if we don't take care of this this unfair playing field, it will end up with the trade deficit surplus picture being flipped at some point.
Yeah, I mean, China's rise has just been so like meteoric and quick. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone expected this thing to come to a head so fast. Because 20 years ago, talking about China, it was like, that's where cheap things are made. You know what I mean? And you didn't really think of it as a country that was so full of wealth, but there's so much new money coming out of China that it's just I just don't think anyone expected this thing to hit us in the face so fast.
They took advantage of it because that's what all of the trade agreements between the U.S. and really like the World Trade Organization was based on China being a third world country. And 30, 40 years ago, that was always the case, where if there was a burgeoning market third world country that was really, just poor technologically and monetarily, the World Trade Organization would give very lopsided trade agreements to help some of these struggling countries. The problem is that those were never, renegotiated deals based on China's growing strength in the world market. I mean, it's like a fixed rate mortgage. It's great for you, it's bad for the bank. So if you're refinancing, if you look at us as the bank in that situation, like we got to refinance because we're losing a bunch of money, and it's gonna, the homeowner's gonna have so much equity in that house, they're just gonna be able to buy the bank. And
yeah, it's strange. It's strange to think that this is all kind of a byproduct of like World War II, like rebuilding decisions that were made to kind of basically allow Europe to rebuild their infrastructure after World War II destroyed so much of it.
Oh, absolutely. And all those Asian countries, and Japan included.
Yeah. All right. So what's your hot take on this one? U.S. gonna win this trade war? No problem.
I say they're gonna win it by the end of September. That's gonna be my guess.
I think China will do some big dick posturing with the rare earth metals, you know what I mean, that we all have in our cell phones. But, there's other places to buy them. I think you'll see an emerging market be like, we'll sell them to you. But,
well, yeah, exactly. And that's the killer, too, is if there's other options. I mean, just 540 billion versus 120 billion. If we eat 120 billion, we will crush their economy into oblivion. And
plus they're 3 times the population. Like, they have so much more to support. You know what I mean? On that 180 billion than we do on our 300, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. They have a billion more people than we do.
And they got universal health care. You got to pay for that.
1 billion more people. There are 100 cities with 1 million people in them in China.
That's crazy.
That's
like unbelievable.
1,000. What? I think it was 1,000. 1,000 cities with. Let me fact check that.
1,000. 1,000's too many.
Let me check.
That's way too many. All right, this will be our grand sign off. While Bill's checking, you guys should write an email to us, techyeahpodcast@gmail.com, or check out the website I built, techyeahpodcast.com or techyeah.pizza, which should be working now. If it doesn't, please write me an email and tell me it doesn't work.
Techyeah.pizza.
Techyeah.pizza is the future, okay?
Oh my God.
You can't hate on techyeah.pizza.
Okay, it is 100.
Of course it's 100.
Yeah, it's 100.
So crazy.
I know. I had for some reason a comma was sticking out. Yeah, so 100 cities with 1 million. And I think we've got 20.
Do we even have 20?
I think so.
I mean, I feel like you're kind of getting to the upper echelon of cities if you're at like 1 million people.
Yeah, I thought it was 20. I mean, and some of those Chinese cities have 10 plus million people. I mean, it's like completely,
they're so dense,
completely insane. But
all right. All I'm gonna say, my closing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
My closing Huawei words. Honestly, I'm not mad at the government. I'm mad at Google. Like, their Android's supposed to be an open source platform. They spend all this money lobbying. Make my Huawei phone work. Like, come up with a deal. You know what I mean? Like,
well, they still have access to the open source one.
No, but they won't they won't be able to push like updates to the phones anymore. Not through Google, right? So Android won't. Your phone won't get any security updates. You won't get access to the Play Store. You won't get access to any of the Google services. So all the Google apps and everything will not be available if this truly goes down.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought it was like they had access to the open source version of Android. But yeah,
the operating system itself. So like you could run the OS, but it can't connect to Google services.
Right. Like you don't have Gmail, you don't have any of that stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Google Maps, any of the stuff you actually use on your Android phone.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Honestly, I see this leading to a maybe Chinese and maybe even like Asian version of Android. Like that's not Android. Like their own OS.
Yeah, well start buying Samsung stock right now. Get it while it's cheap.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not cheap.
I'm sure it's not either.
No lie. You should probably buy some Samsung stock right now. Or find a company that's like behind the scenes at Samsung. Like Kirin makes those processors in Korea that they're probably going to come up.
Qualcomm too.
Qualcomm's not cheap either though. But yeah, it's a good time to own a Galaxy. It's a bad time to have a Huawei phone like me. But yeah, with that, you guys got the email. Check us out on Twitter and Facebook. You can find all those links at techyeah.pizza. And that'll do it for us. We love you guys.
Love you, TYPs.
Out.
Peace.
Did I just say out?
Yeah, what was that?
I don't know. It didn't even come out right. I'm going to delete it.
Out. You weren't making fun of Niki Lauda because he was Austrian, were you?
Out.
Get out of here.
I want some schnitzel.
Get out of here. Stop listening to Tech Podcast.
I'm going to turn this off.
All right.